And so we are going, when Hayden gives us the green light, we are now live. Welcome back to Senate Education. And we have Ms. Lindsay Hedges before our committee, who is the Policy Communications Specialist with Agency of Education, to weigh in on H461, our miscellaneous education bill that the House sent us.
Yes.
So with that, Ms. Hedges, the floor is yours.
I have hard copies for all those shirts.
Great, yeah, please send them around. Great. Oh, I believe Hayden's already provided.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me today. I know I'm in this room with you all frequently, but thank you for the opportunity to join you on a more formal basis. I'm going to be providing testimony today on H461, which is the House Miscellaneous Education Bill. And of course, for the record, my name is Lindsay Hedges. I am the Policy Communications Specialist at the Agency of Education. And I'm here today to give an overview of the administration's position on each section of this bill, acknowledging you already got to walk through. This is like administration agency perspective on the bill. Agency is supportive of and has requested the language in many of these sections, and many of these changes aim to streamline processes and increase equity in service delivery. So sections 1 through 3 repeal the mandatory implementation of the shared school district data management system, which I will be referring to as SSDMS. Sections 1 and 2 strike the language that made the program mandatory, and that was passed by the General Assembly in 2018. Section 3 removes a quarterly reporting requirement that was added in the 2021 session. Previously, the program was voluntary, and these sections 1 through 3 revert the program back to how it was previously. The agencies of Education and Digital Services made their recommendation to strike the mandate based on difficulties with implementations and migration to SSDMS software system, and this conclusion was made after the deadline was extended multiple times. You have our December legislative report, and that provides more detail on some of the challenges faced by school districts, and that is on your website, and it's also linked in the testimony. With the repeal, supervisory unions may choose to adopt and migrate to SSDMS still, and existing users of SSDMS may choose to use another system if they so choose.
Yes.
Can we ask questions?
Yes.
Okay, so my assumption is that
It's not full.
DDMS was for the benefit of kind of maybe the agency to have compatible information in the same format so that the reports could be coalesced.
Yes, so all supervisory unions have a uniform chart of accounts, and that's just a shared accounting system, so it creates consistent comparable data. And so with the repeal, supervisory unions may still choose to adopt SSDMS. They still have to adopt a uniform chart of accounts. It just doesn't have to be SSDMS. This
Okay,
is just
so
an attempt to make everyone use the same software.
okay, so given your experience in the state, or the other potential systems, do they provide the information necessary, and they're, you don't have to jump, that they are compatible enough to get the information desired at the agency level?
Yeah, so the agency concluded that using the software that's out there, that is easiest for each supervisory union, can provide the same level. It's just not the same. So we have to do a little bit more of matching up the data on our end, but.
So just following up on Senator Lee's question. So the goal is really just to get everybody on the same software for consistency, and it just never clicked.
Yeah, just due to.
It seems like we always have
Yeah.
no judgment. In all administrations, it seems like IT stuff is hard to get everybody working on the same page. Senator Williams.
Do you know who did adopt this? Who
That is outlined in the report. I don't know off the top of my head, but it does give you kind of more numbers of how many schools have adopted it.
Question would be, why did it do it? Was it too expensive? Didn't want to share the information?
Yeah, I think some schools, it just for the existing systems they had in place, which just didn't mesh well. Some schools were a little bit more up to date, so it meshed fine, it was easy transition, and others it just is too resource intensive.
It's a good question. And I think, Hayden, do we have the person coming in that's going to talk to us a little bit more about this software system, the financial guy? Is it Banks? I think so. Yeah, I think he's gonna come in. It's a good question. Like, why didn't it work for some of these folks? Yeah.
And that is all I have to say on sections 1 through 3. So any other questions? Happy to answer. Move on. Okay. Section 4 is the National Guard Tuition Benefit Program, and while the agency isn't directly involved in the administration of this program, the administration does support this addition as well as any other provisions that support current and future National Guard members. But again, we're not directly involved.
Next, background question. So is this like a full tuition? Up to the, I guess it's a UEM.
Yeah, my understanding it's up to the and state tuition rate.
And doesn't it also include members from out of state?
You mean
The
folks that
National
come
Guard,
into Vermont?
they may belong to a National Guard unit in Vermont, but they live in another
Yes, I
state.
believe so. Might defer to my colleague, is that accurate?
Ted Fisher from my Agency of Education. I just want to reinforce what my colleague just said, which is this is not the agency's program, but on behalf of the governor's office, we do support anything that we can do to support our National Guard members. I believe, Senator, that yes, it applies to National Guards persons who both live in and without of state who serve in the Vermont National Guard. And the goal here really is to not only support our current Guard members, but also to make Vermont an attractive place for prospective Guards persons to move to Vermont to serve our community and the country.
We're going to hear from Representative Lisa Hango, who's excellent on these issues. And
Mr. Chair, by your leave, I apologize. I just wanted to reinforce, it is in our testimony, or in Lindsay's testimony, but the program is existing, has existed since 2018. This is adding an additional program. So you can find the information in statute, and your council might be able to provide you a little bit more background about who's eligible as well. Apologies.
any other interruptions, Tim?
No, sir.
So again, I know this is a program.
Yeah.
We're starting to dig into this. So is it a residency, Vermont residents who are in the Guard, or potentially like a New Hampshire individual who lives in New Hampshire but participates in the Vermont Guard?
Yeah, my understanding is it's, I think it's in the Vermont National Guard
Vermonters in the Vermont National Guard, or anywhere.
in the Vermont National Guard.
The Vermont Brigade is made up of units within New Hampshire and New York. I think it was units, I can't verify it. I won't, but I think it was units recruiting to get people that belong to the Vermont unit
Yep.
to get education benefits.
Okay.
It's not, as a guardsman, could they have, this is a little off, slightly off topic, but do you have GI Bill benefits in the Guard?
If you're a veteran, when you're talking about veterans.
No, not a combat veteran, just GI Bill.
No, they have a tuition assistance program, which is for Vermont State College. And
Section 5 is the section on home study. So the agency requested this language to streamline application process for home study families, aligns us with our neighboring states and reduces paperwork process for both families and the agency. And after I go over the next section, section six, I will pass the mic to General Counsel Emily Simmons, who I know is waiting on Zoom. And she'll be able to go over your questions and some of the more technical aspects, because I know that there have been some changes based on feedback from advocates for this section. Section 6 covers the Act 1 working group. The changes in this section extend the deadlines of the working group and allow them to wrap up their work this summer, June 30th, 2023. Previously, the statutory deadline was December 2022. You see that deadline has now passed. And the agency supports this work and the additional time needed to make sure that the group can complete it in a way that supports the importance of and effort put into this initiative.
Terrific. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but a quick comment, which is, I really appreciate that you defined your acronym at the beginning. Not everyone does that, and for those of us who are new, it's really, really helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
also helpful for me since I'm here.
Right? Thanks.
Good brain check for me.
And we're gonna probably add a couple of things to this. The things that sort of are popping out for me, driver's ed, possible CTE stuff. And then, does everyone remember when Laura Yang came in and she said she
Yes.
wanted some language? And I've got to go back and pull that apart and figure out what Laura asked for. And so whatever that is, that may end up in here as well. So we might have him back in, and if you wouldn't mind following our work on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I will pass it off to Ms. Simmons.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons.
Hello, how are you all doing?
We're great. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. For the record, Emily Simmons, General Counsel at the Agency of Education. I've provided some written background testimony on the Section 5 home study language in the miscellaneous education bill, the House's miscellaneous.
And Ms. Simmons, if I may I'll just remind the committee that what we're hearing a response to is we had several edits that were proposed to us by Ms. Rita Dunlap. And so this is the agency, and she has very good written testimony. If you haven't had an opportunity to review it, she took us through it last week. And this is the agency's response to that.
Absolutely. So with that set up by the chair, I'll go to page 2 of my testimony. These are just some very short and I hope easy to understand bullet points about the amendments I believe you heard from Ms. Dunlap and my iteration of how I think they would show up in the bill if you would take these as friendly amendments to the language in front of you. So the version of the bill that I believe you're working from is the House as passed, which on my screen did not have line numbers, which is a little unfortunate. So I tried to refer very specifically to the section and subsection. And it might be easier for me to speak with your legislative counsel about these if you are supportive of the changes. They are essentially to clarify the difference between the two types of notice that parents would send to the Agency of Education. There is an enrollment notice, which I think of as an initial notice. That's your first time enrolling as a home study program. After that, the language would have you send in a separate and shorter notice on an annual basis every year after that. So I thought it was a good note to remove the word annual from the first type of initial notice so that they're very clearly separate forms for parents to use. So that's really only a change in section A.
I'm sorry, Senator Jewett.
Okay, no, I've been oriented now. I was looking at the testimony and I need to be looking at the bill. Thank you.
And again, I'm sorry, it would be so much better if I put the line numbers, but that wasn't the version I was working.
No worries. Thank you.
So the second change is about clarifying the means by which a standardized test can be administered to a student. Currently, the language has two methods, which is that a school district would administer the test or that a testing company would administer the test. Ms. Dunlap had a great point, which is that some commonly used standardized tests have instructions for proctoring by different means. And the agency agrees those tests should be acceptable as long as the instructions were followed and the test was given with fidelity to those instructions. So we would add the language or administered in a manner approved by the testing company to accomplish that change.
No, go ahead.
So I'm just, again, going through the testimony. So we have, trying to think the best way to follow what you're trying to do here. Maybe what you could do is orient us a little bit or reorient us to the way you handled your testimony. You don't have anything has Ms. Dunlap's proposals followed by the position of the agency, correct?
No, I'm working from emails that Ms. Dunlap and I exchanged. So we know we're on the same page. This is just a matter of presenting it in terms of what we're both talking about within the text of the bill and what these amendments would look like on a technical basis.
Okay, so is it safe to say that you and Ms. Dunlap now are on the same, everyone's in agreement, and now you're just sharing with us what that agreement is?
That's exactly right. We've emailed, I've found all her suggestions to be sort of friendly amendments to what the agency was trying to accomplish with our original proposal.
Okay. Any other questions right now? Yeah, for sure. Okay. Ms. Simmons, please go ahead.
So the next change is, and I'll just give you the substance of why it's a change, and maybe that will register with what Ms. Dunlap said, and then we'll talk about the language. The next change is to clarify that while a home study program will be required to provide 175 days of instruction for each year, that does not need to occur on the same timeline as a traditional, say, public school year, and that can be 175 days just per year of the home study program. We kind of learned from working with her. I think she told you as well that some programs run January to January instead of, say, August to June.
Senator Weeks.
Just curious, did you have any reaction to the fact that that there's no mention of hours per day? Is that important or not important to the agency?
My viewpoint is it's not part of the current law, and so introducing a measure of hours would be new to the home study policy, and we don't see a need to do that. So that change, if you're looking at the text of the bill, would occur on page 6, which is section A5, which speaks about providing assurance that the program provides 175 days of instruction in the minimum course of study. And it says specifically : we would insert the words per year before the word specific. And then the last point on my testimony is not a suggestion for change. I think the agency had not yet gone on the record about the effective date for the policy change if it were to pass. And I want to be clear that we feel that we can execute these changes this summer. So with the effective date of this July 1, and if passed, the new home study requirements would be in effect after that, which includes home study programs that begin around the start of the traditional school year. So in the fall of the year. That's all I had for you. I was wondering if you had any substantive questions about the policy change itself. I definitely got the hint that you wanted to get to the nitty gritty of those particular requests for amendment, but I can also answer any questions about Section 5 generally.
I think just overall what we're going to be looking a little bit more into with some of our colleagues, I would say probably the NEA superintendents, principals, and school board members is, I think those are the best groups to also ask the question, are we overseeing the homeschool folks enough? Are we not? Are there some outstanding items there that might be missing? I mean, those are my questions that we will jump into. I think hours during the day, what sorts of things are happening, but what sorts of things aren't happening that maybe should be happening.
Sure. I'll make a plug from the agency's point of view. I think our strongest argument for these changes are that we do not see these changes as providing less or lower quality oversight than exists today for home study. Certainly there are states that have stronger oversight than Vermont in current law. The agency is not asking to go in that direction. What we're asking to do is alleviate what really amounts to administrative burden, and we don't see it as actually adding a lot of value for the agency's oversight role or the home study families' role in providing those programs to their students. So I guess to put it very bluntly, I would say for myself, what we're doing right now, we don't see as much value in, and we'd like to use that agency capacity for other purposes to execute the state's interest. And I think home study families would appreciate having less of the administrative burden as well.
Sure. Do we track, when we have numbers, the state has numbers around how many students afterward go into the trades, do some kind of higher ed? Do we have any numbers like that connected to homeschool students?
I don't think we have an on-point exact match data collection to what you described, but we would probably have some incidental data because many home study students, especially at the more high school ages, participate in various public school programs that they have an entitlement to enroll in public school courses. Their participation would trigger some data tracking. Their use of some flexible pathways, for example, would show up in our data. But we don't have authority in the current law to collect that kind of information, and so we don't, right? That's really the framework that I have to acknowledge for the place where we don't have general oversight authority. We have the very specific levers that are in the law and nothing else. And the current law doesn't give the agency very much direct authority over these programs, and I think that's by design in the policy.
Perhaps the home study advocacy group might have a.
That's a good point.
The state's never mandated the requirements, but I bet you those.
I bet Rita does. That's a good point. Yep, we can check. Any other questions for Ms. Simmons? Ms. Simmons, would you mind, is there anyone that objects with these amendments right now? Okay, would you mind working with our Ledge Council to incorporate these amendments into the next draft?
It would be my pleasure.
We'll leave it there. Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Okay, committee, that's, I'm afraid, it for today. What's that?
I've got very inconsequential, probably the most inconsequential change that I have to make. Page 5, subsection E. Do you get rid of that second of, just say evidence of passing the GED?
Page 5.
Oh, yeah. Good catch.
The passive voice, too many.
Attention to detail.
Evidence of passing of the GED. It's just
Passing the
passing.
GED. It's my contribution for the day.
That's so done.
Thank you.
You're on fire today.
I have take.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Yeah, so again, if anybody changes their mind in the next 30 minutes, meet me by my car. We'll do a little trip down.
It's a good day.
It's a good day.
Early.
Well, I think we'll